Welcome back to today's webinar live here at BINA. So the festival of Purim is in the air. On the 14th of Adar, the Hebrew month of Adar, this year is on the eve of March 12th, Saturday night. Jews will be celebrating the special holiday. We celebrate our salvation from the threat of annihilation by the wicked Haman. God saved the Jewish people, and ever since, we celebrate with great joy this festival. So what I would like to do over the next couple of weeks is to talk about topics that are somehow related to the holiday of Purim. One of the mitzvahs of Purim, and perhaps one of the main mitzvahs of Purim, is, you guessed it, is to drink. To drink alcohol, to drink more than you're used to. In fact, it says that a person is supposed to drink, a person is obligated to drink on Purim to the extent that they don't know the difference between Orur Haman and Baruch Mordechai, which means cursed is Haman and blessed is Mordechai. Now, that sounds like a very strange mitzvah. What kind of idea is this, to drink and to forget what Purim is all about, basically, which is all about Haman being cursed and Mordechai being blessed? Why would you want to forget about that? So the truth is that we need to dedicate a shir to that, but before we get there, before we get to the consumption of alcohol specifically on Purim, and what exactly the mitzvah is and who it applies to and to what extent are we supposed to do it, we need to discuss alcohol in Judaism in general. How does Judaism look at the drinking of alcohol? Is it encouraged or is it frowned upon, like other religions? It is frowned upon or even forbidden. How does Judaism look at it? Is it a good thing or is it a bad thing? Before I continue, I would like to make a very important disclaimer. Everything we're going to be talking about today, or in general on this topic of drinking alcohol, is not directed to somebody who is an alcoholic. Someone who is an alcoholic, someone who is addicted to alcohol, is a separate case and has its own set of rules. Somebody who drinks alcohol to the extent that their lives become not manageable should never justify drinking alcohol, no matter what spiritual reasons and no matter what spiritual significance we give, because to them it is only damaging. So how do we look at alcohol? The answer is, of course, like everything in Judaism, it's not so simple. It depends. But before we get to that, and before we get to the perspective and the outlook, how we're supposed to look at alcohol, I would like to discuss today some practical laws and stories on both sides of the coin, where we see the positive side of alcohol and the negative side of alcohol. So let's start with the positive. Wine in Jewish law is considered an important and high-class drink. Therefore, whenever we want to sanctify something, whenever we want to bless something, a lot of the time we do it over a cup of wine. For example, the most famous example, the Torah says, Zocher es yoim ha-Shabbos l'kadshay, that we are commanded to remember the holy Shabbos and to sanctify it. How do we remember something? So we know that whenever the Torah says to remember something, it means to verbalize it, to say it in words. From there we learn out the idea of Kiddush and Havdalah, the idea of sanctifying Shabbos when it comes in, when we make Kiddush, when we sanctify the Shabbos with words describing the sanctity of Shabbos, and Havdalah, which is when Shabbos goes out, when we separate the sanctity of Shabbos from the mundane of the week. How do we make Kiddush and how do we make Havdalah? So the rabbis, our sages, instituted that we do that over a cup of wine. So we make Kiddush Friday night on a cup of wine. We then make Kiddush on Shabbos day on a cup of wine. We then, when Shabbos goes out, we make Havdalah on a cup of wine. So generally speaking, you'll be drinking 3 cups of wine every single Shabbos. On the first night, and outside of Israel on the second night of Pesach, of Passover, the rabbis instituted a mitzvah, a takana, that we drink 4 cups of wine. We drink 4 cups of wine to remember the 4 expressions of redemption, which it says in the Torah. Once again, the idea of wine to experience the freedom of Pesach night, we specifically do it over a cup of wine. When a bride and a groom stand under the chuppah to get married. And right before the chassan, the groom, gives the bride a ring, which is the legal act of marriage according to Jewish law, we make a blessing describing the sanctity of marriage. We make that blessing over a cup of wine. Also under the chuppah, we make 7 blessings describing the creation of man and woman and in general the sanctity of marriage, which are called the Sheva Brachot, the 7 blessings. We do them over a cup of wine. For 7 days, every time there was a quorum, there was a minyan of people eating together, and the chassan and the kala, for 7 days after their wedding, the bride and groom are eating with them. We also make these Sheva Brachot, we also make these 7 blessings by the grace after meals, by benching, and we do it over a cup of wine. Every festival, not only Purim, every festival, Pesach, Shavuot, Sukkot, the 3 main festivals, we are commanded in the Torah that we are supposed to be happy. Now, happiness is a feeling. Generally speaking, Torah does not command us for feelings, it commands us to do something. What do we do that makes us happy on the festivals? So the Jewish code of law tells us that it actually depends who you are. If we're talking about children, you're supposed to give them, in the Jewish code of law's expression, nuts and things like that. In our terms, that would mean sweets, lollies, and the like. Women fulfill that mitzvah by getting new clothes, buying new clothes in honor and jewelry in honor of the festival. And men fulfill that mitzvah through drinking a cup of wine. So every Jewish male is actually obligated to drink on every single day of the festival a cup of wine. And that actually doesn't only apply to, for example, Passover. The first 2 days and the last 2 days are a real festival, we don't do any work, but it also applies to the middle days, the Chol HaMoed days, where it's sort of weekday and festival together. It also applies to that, and we are commanded to drink a cup of wine. These are all a list of the obligations that Torah actually, most of what we just said is actually an obligation, that we have to drink wine at these times. However, there are also many customs, which, of course, a Jewish custom has great significance. Jewish customs relating to alcohol. For example, when someone is marking a yahrzeit, when someone is marking the anniversary of a family member's passing, the custom is to say a l'chaim over some sort of alcoholic beverage. Hasidim are well known that when they sit down to inspire one another to serve God, they also make a l'chaim, they do it over an alcoholic drink. Now, before we get carried away and think that alcohol is just amazing, let's talk about some of the negatives. Because the truth is that with all that we said before, alcohol can also be a terrible thing. King Solomon writes in the book of Mishlei, and I'll just translate the pasuk. He says, "Who has wounds without cause? Who has bloodshot eyes? Those who sit late over wine, those who come to search for mixed wine. Do not look at wine when it is red. When he puts his eye on the cup, it goes smoothly. Ultimately, it will bite like a serpent." We see from this verse that wine and alcohol can be a terrible, terrible thing. And we find quite a few negative events in the Torah that all happened as a result of alcohol. Our sages tell us that the original sin of Adam and Eve, who ate from the tree of knowledge, was actually, according to one opinion, was a grapevine, meaning it was wine. After Noah survived the flood, a terrible flood which destroyed the entire inhabited world. The first thing he did was he actually planted a vineyard. And when the grapes grew, he squeezed them and he made wine, and he drank the wine and he got totally intoxicated. And the Torah tells us that this led to terrible, immodest and indecent behavior. And it actually led to him not being able to have any more children as a result. We find that after the city of Sodom, the wicked city of Sodom was destroyed in the time of Abraham, Avram Avinu, Abraham had a nephew who lived there. His name was Lot, who actually wasn't the greatest guy, but God saved him on the merit of Abraham. And when he ran out of the city, he ran in with him and his daughters. His wife didn't even make it out. She turned into a pillar of salt, but that's another story. And his daughters thought that they are the sole survivors of the entire world. They didn't realize it was only their city, Sodom, which got destroyed. They thought the entire world got destroyed. And therefore they devised a plan that they're actually going to have children together with their father. And what they did was they got Lot intoxicated and they had relations with him, and they became pregnant, and they had children. So again, a terrible immoral act of incest came as a result of drinking alcohol. We know that when the Mishkan, the temporary temple, the tabernacle in the desert, was erected and they dedicated the Mishkan, it was a day of great celebration. The two older sons of Aaron, the high priest, whose names were Nadav and Haviu, they also drank wine and as a result walked into the Holy of Holies without permission, which was considered a terrible, terrible thing, and actually died as a result, which sort of put a stop to the great celebrations of the day. We know that way before, many, many years before the first temple was destroyed, there was the exile of the 10 tribes. Because when the first temple was destroyed, there were only 2 tribes left in the land of Israel. The 10 tribes were exiled way before that. And one of the reasons given why the 10 tribes were exiled was because it says that there was an excessive alcohol consumption on their part. They abused the drinking of alcohol, which led to the exile of the 10 tribes. So going through all these stories, and we don't even need necessarily these stories, one can understand this with common sense. Alcohol can lead to immorality, alcohol can lead to violence, it can lead to terrible, terrible things. We know that there are also a number of laws regarding the drinking of alcohol. There are 3 things which a person is not allowed to do after they drink alcohol. First of all, a person is not allowed to pray. If a person drinks enough alcohol that they wouldn't be able to stand in front of a king with proper respect, they are actually not allowed to pray until the alcohol wears off. A rabbi who drinks alcohol cannot give a halachic ruling when he's under the influence of alcohol because obviously his mind is impaired and therefore he is unable to give a proper halachic ruling. And a priest, a kohen who drinks alcohol, is unable to give the priestly blessings to the congregation. So the question which we still have to answer is alcohol good or is it bad? These 3 laws which we just mentioned, I can understand. Even if alcohol is only a good thing, at the end of the day, your mind is impaired, your judgment is impaired, and therefore I can understand why I wouldn't be able to pray and won't be able to give a halachic ruling, etc., etc. But how do you put together these terrible, horrible stories which are direct result of drinking alcohol, together with the fact that we put such an emphasis on alcohol, kiddush and havdalah and a wedding and great times in the Jewish year where we associate with drinking of alcohol? How do we put these 2 things together? And for that, we're going to wait till Thursday to discuss the perspective and the outlook that Torah has on the drinking of alcohol. Have a good day.